Oracle or something.
Well, let me
Poetry.
tell you about this and that. All mine relates.
I read your
historically.
poetry. Remember that book that you put together? That
Right.
little book. I read it.
Well, you
You're a
read the
good poet.
17 places? That's the latest one. That's the one I'm gonna do tonight.
Well, no, I
Show?
haven't heard that.
Yeah, it's a-
That-
That you
hybrid
love
meeting, so
because,
people join
you know,
it.
you go
Oh,
around to these
we're not-
places.
oh, okay.
and-
Yeah, they'll see you.
I don't know, Hank may show up.
He
may
was
not.
my neighbor. He
Oh,
lives
yeah.
in Brunswick Acres.
Oh, yeah.
His
Well,
whole family was there. His brother and sister. Yeah.
Yeah, I knew he was in the thing. You can help yourself to any of those.
No,
What?
I'm taking one at a time, Ed, come on.
This from the library historian.
We're by the sixth. Any place?
Oh,
Yeah,
seal,
yeah, and then
yeah.
the,
Seal, yeah.
The
Really
third
Yeah.
one, see, this
Well, nice
goes,
to know you're carrying on. for
let's see,
work.
we got
Yeah,
1773, 74, and 75. Okay, so I think you have
Yeah, she'd still be
74.
missed,
now.
that's for sure.
I had, mine started in,
That's 73.
Yeah, she was something.
yeah, but it started before.
There's a good
Started
site,
in
there's a
60.
website that
And what
is
happens to
on,
Vincent?
they have like a, they have like a
Vincent,
tribute site.
They're
He
two
dies.
Vincents.
It's pretty nice.
Well,
The
John's,
first one, John
Yeah.
Weather, the one in the story, he will be captured
how's
by the
Ewing
British
doing?
out of
Okay.
Long Island.
Family, okay.
Brooklyn Heights.
Yeah, everything's.
And they put him in
You're
a
okay?
sugar house,
Okay.
the prison
Not a lot
for
of
the
things going on,
Americans.
but, you know, it's like everything.
I asked because it says he and somebody was talking,
When are you
and
getting your
little
raise?
did they know.
Yeah.
I guess John was talking to, somebody his age, and little did they know that one of their sons would not be alive.
Yeah, well, that's.
You know, they just built
And,
a
he
huge
died in the
branch
prison.
library in Franklin
So
Park.
he did wait.
Yeah, he was
I
captain
went
of
over there
a
and
militia
see it. It's
company.
really
He
nice.
was,
Very big building.
So I
Yeah,
actually, the war,
It's
he
not
was,
that, I
When
mean,
his
they have a
baby was
bigger
born
building
before he
in
died.
yes.
Dumont Lane.
Pregnant then.
Well,
Uh-huh.
I certainly, well,
This
of course,
is
that's
gonna
part
be
of the
very
fiction.
nice and
Oh,
I can almost
see, I-
walk there.
See, in other words, he really
Yeah.
died and all that, but as far as the baby being born before and the
You're
stuff
gonna
about
compete
his
with
wife, since we don't have any
Well, we
details
know
about
it's
it, I had to fill in.
I didn't know whether this was nonfiction or,
It's a
Historical
crossbreed.
fiction.
It's a
Okay.
crossbreed. In
want
other
to
words,
this
do
one
like
I
I
try to
read
get
the
a lot of
Get rid
local
of,
history by
penalties
writing
if you
and
overdo
and
your
Yep,
accounts.
that's true.
Okay, but I
That's
have to
true.
fill in the gaps.
So you can just,
how many
keep
people,
them.
I can't tell you how many people, friends of mine, that you're, what you're doing
Randy,
about
do you
the
want me to
space.
admit people so you
And
can pay
when I
attention
tell
to
my
the
daughter-
Yeah,
She
you've done that before, right?
Saw that
Yeah.
same piece on 60 Minutes a month or two ago,
Yeah.
about black
The
family
way it
that
looks to me is they'll just come up on the screen. I don't think I
have a
have to.
family reunion every year.
Oh, you have
And they
to
bought
check
something
a,
out.
they bought a house on a big piece of property somewhere.
Mhm.
And
Because I
turns
just
out
let them in, like,
that their,
do this.
generations
This
back
are still
were
there.
slaves on that plantation.
It just comes right
yeah,
up on the screen.
yeah.
And they said, and this, I
Yeah.
think,
Yeah,
they
the last time we
did,
were letting them come
they
in.
were having
It comes
trouble
up down there
because
too.
Okay.
a lot of the people didn't have last names.
So there's
or they
three,
took the name
but
of
that's
the
us.
plantation owner's
Correct.
last name.
And then, yeah, I
I'm
think,
working on that
I think
right now.
everybody's.
Yeah, I know you showed, I just
Yeah.
thought, you
Yeah.
should see what
I
this
could help
guy's
you
doing,
with that.
I don't know. He must have a lot of free time or something.
Well, I'm retired,
Yeah,
so
well.
then you get a lot of free time,
You've
right?
been retired for years. Come on.
In January.
I've been collecting information for years.
No, he's a,
Finally getting.
You've been on the tape from Social
oh,
Security.
yeah, I want to take
That's
that
what
is.
teachers do.
Oh, you were a teacher?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was very-
You know, but the states, Chris,
I tried to teach.
You're
I was in New
wonderful.
Brunswick.
your governor screwed you by not giving you a cost of living.
Yeah.
I got screwed this when I retired
Scam program.
because they did away with department chairs and I was department chair. And I had to take
But
a
you get all,
teacher.
but you get all your medical, and I was a
Oh,
social
yeah.
worker,
No, I don't know
and we
about
got
that.
nothing, nothing.
But they have state medical and that's crap compared to New York City.
Well, it might be crap, but it's better than nothing.
Oh, better than nothing.
How about having
Oh, I
nothing?
don't know who to talk
Oh,
to. Yeah.
I have nothing too, so I'm not paying
I'm not
big
the pass the
bucks.
buck, but yeah, he's.
No, no, no.
This is what I'm doing tonight. I just happen to have copies for everybody.
Can I keep a copy of this?
No.
No.
It's gonna be in the library on the book.
But it cost me this much for gas. Come on.
The camera here, or whatever they're doing here. Hi. Hello.
I got a copy for
All
everybody.
right.
Oh, you already have
At
one.
some
I
point,
got
I was
one.
laying here.
Okay, hey, ladies, here we go.
He's an aggressive ex-teacher, apparently.
You get autographed?
A
Cal?
service.
No, it just has my name printed on the front. I'll be glad to autograph them, but here's the problem. This will eventually get on display in the library, and then people can pick it, read it, and put it back. So far, I've only had 2 stolen since I started in October.
I'm gonna steal it.
range. I have social worker friends who are.
I mean,
therapists.
seriously, there's no fines or
But
anything,
then I
what's the
also
difference?
work With social workers when
I know.
People steal anything.
So I checked the book out and now I'm getting a notice that it's due. So is it really due or is it not due?
I was the director of the department.
I should ask.
Did
you return it?
Uh,
No, I renewed it. Oh, you renewed it. But I'm thinking I should have never checked it out because I don't think you check them out anymore.
I don't know, people have to check them out, but, I mean, you have to keep track of books.
Yeah.
It wasn't my choice, but it turned out to be.
You might take a minute for the one area to catch up with the other area. The renewals to the. Maybe, yeah.
I just.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Well, maybe it's not.
Well,
I'm trying to find my house.
So, all right.
But,
Yeah,
oh,
there's-
Striker.
1970.
Which Striker?
Yeah, that's coming.
Talked like, William Striker, like family.
No, John Stryker, cavalry group, attacked the British on Route 27.
Okay, yeah, because
10-mile
of,
run.
because William Striker is like a big deal.
Oh, yeah.
Not too many
veterans.
people.
Well, here's the thing, it has been knocked off as far as a source. We did our services for, they don't use it anymore, they use it anymore.
Billy, and I don't know where.
Okay,
Remember
okay.
that one time?
Yes.
Or the South Brunswick.
I know, there's a lot of articles I saw. His name was
Yeah, he's a good writer.
Yeah.
And then he became, and
Yeah.
he also mixed poetry with
Between
writing.
that and my mom's house, we're cleaning it out, between the
Yeah.
dust and the
Poetry.
mildew, basement.
You know, the
So we went there, we went.
Weatherspoon.
Weather.
That I-
Yeah.
It looks so old.
What do you call it? The weather screen?
Yeah, more art in here.
Yeah, the weather.
Well,
And I went to.
you know, when the art group met, this room looked like a warehouse. So what I did, I brought in some paintings, I picked some at random and just put them up. And I built these little stands so that people can bring in their art.
We got the full screen.
So this is just an example of what we can do.
Yeah, no,
Oh, yeah.
Will let me know, so I don't really know.
You got-
Art,
but, you
is
know,
that your,
We
are
can
those
just
your
go on.
pieces?
Yeah, those
There's
are
nothing-
the-
it's
some
got
of mine.
nothing
Have you ever
there.
tried to, I know I was reading.
Oh, that's something on there.
Displaying art.
Oh, yeah, but it's basically revolutionary.
I don't know what it, I didn't see that part.
Yeah, there he
I
is.
had just moved.
I don't do this.
Oh, or is that the poet? I thought that was the guy that does the historian.
Where's my water?
I had moved from
That's
the
the main
Midwest
thing.
to Jersey and was,
So we have Hags here, and anybody else who comes in, I can have them join in. So, you know, it's almost 6:35. So we'll start with Hags, right? So
We have to, beauty before age. isn't it?
okay, all right.
Wow.
Okay.
Actually, if you can give me a minute, I gotta take care of a text real quick.
Okay, Hank, yeah, take your time. We're okay. We don't have to start like.
Get yourself situated, and I'll jump in. Give me a second.
He's got to work on his voice.
Yeah.
Do the,
Okay, so
Very pretty.
we're good.
I went to school.
Sound is in.
And now his kids are going.
Did you pay for your swimming club?
My granddaughter may be the assistant manager.
Oh, yeah, they lost both
I
managers.
know.
Really? Does she know?
This is the Willow Swim Club in Kettle Park.
Oh.
Does she know a lot about the place? Does
Oh,
she-
yeah, she's worked there for 2 years now,
Oh, yeah.
and she's a lifeguard.
How do you get the caption?
Maybe the assistant manager.
Oh, cool.
Who's the new
And we're
manager?
debating whether to allow her to do it because she's 17.
Yeah, she's young. Did they hire a manager?
I guess so, but I haven't kept up with it. My wife fills out the check and signs me up.
Did they
I don't go in the water.
Is there a contract with a place to get food there?
Uh-oh.
Well, that's another thing that's up in here, because that's a yearly thing. Every
Yeah.
year they gotta renew.
I suggested.
What did I do?
What's he saying?
Yeah,
I don't know, I've lost touch with that, you know.
That's him right there.
I'll be there in the shadows.
I can harass you when I see you.
I'll be there for the swim
I can
meet,
figure out.
that's for sure.
Well, that was like last
You
year.
know what team she's on now?
No,
Girls flag football.
Really?
This is catching on. in the state of New
Yeah, my
Jersey.
little
My,
neighbor.
my granddaughter is a swimmer also
Oh, okay.
in high school.
Oh,
Girls rugby.
A lifeguard at the.
Okay, there's been a little
Oh,
challenge
yeah,
right now, but I'm okay.
my granddaughter's a lifetime. Yeah.
Oh,
it's
that's where
Bristol.
she is.
Yeah.
That's
No,
where
no,
Kylie
it's
is.
just like-
She's guard there.
Oh, really?
She's 18.
It's a long story, but yeah.
She works Wednesday,
Little
Thursday.
challenges, but
Wednesday,
And
it's
Emma
okay.
probably knows her, Emma Bendigni, ask her if she knows Emma Bendigni.
Yeah,
That's my,
thanks. It's, you know, just listen. I can tell you about it,
It's a small.
but I'm sitting
world.
okay.
How's your painting?
Yeah, good.
Up there, look.
Oh.
I found out about the art commission's meetings, they have art meetings.
Oh,
And they're gonna do, we might as well promote it. The speaker is gonna talk about Eastern art, Western art, you know, Western Civ and Eastern.
Hi.
Compare and
Come on in.
contrast the two.
Can't get it now.
Right here,
oh.
first Tuesday, is it?
I'll tell you in a minute.
Here you go. That'll help you a long time.
The next meeting.
Is it Tuesdays they meet?
Well, it's only once a month.
Right.
It's Wednesday, the 3rd, the first Wednesday.
Wednesday, the 3rd.
Wednesday, the 3rd is the first Wednesday of every month at 7 o'clock in this room. And the
Ay,
topic
ay, ay.
Hi.
The next
Come on
time is non-Western art.
You're right. Dr. Latimer. This is Dr. Penelope Latimer, star of stage, screen, television, and radio.
Nice to meet
Star
you.
of Ed Belding's former.
My former boss.
Yes.
Ah.
What a
Put
surprise.
up with him?
And I brought out because
Hi,
of
come on
him.
in.
He's pretty
There's
dead.
a chair, there's a chair there.
I know, this,
Oh,
Holy cow.
Ed, who don't you know?
hello.
How are you?
This is New Brunswick Public School reunion.
Absolutely.
We got a chair for you down there, Wayne.
Oh,
Here.
that's too far from the door.
Wow.
No, you're only gonna stay to sign autographs and then you're gonna leave. Okay,
Oh,
great.
oh.
I ran out of copies,
You can take
passing
this
them
one. You
around.
can take this one. I'm not gonna.
Okay, so if you can share,
Sure.
that would be great.
again.
Just-
I'll sit here and I can see her.
Andy, you're
Just
gonna
like him.
talk, have some.
Oh, is that showing on here?
Right?
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't
I'll sit
want
here.
to. I don't
Thank you.
I was the assistant.
Allergies.
I know, you didn't want me close to it.
So Hank, you all set?
Yeah, I am. I think I am.
You ready?
It's
up to
Oh, okay, I get it.
Okay, all right, so we're gonna start, the first person, poet's gonna speak tonight is Hank Kalet. He's a poet from South Brunswick, and he was also a reporter for the South Brunswick Post for many years. And now he does poetry, and he does some other, you work at a news organization, right, Hank?
No, actually, now I'm teaching.
You're a teacher, okay.
Yeah, I teach at Rutgers. I teach at Middlesex, Brookdale, basically wherever they'll have me, you know. So,
Okay,
yeah. So I was the editor of the Post, and the reporter at the Post, and at the Packet, and then when Patch launched, I did that for about a year and a half. So, I still do freelance work. I still write for a variety of places. So,
okay. Okay, so I have one of your, just to start off, I have one of your books here, just so people can see
Okay.
some of the things you've done. But I know the first thing you wanted to talk about, you're going to read a poem on MLK, right?
Well, I'm going to get to that. I have a couple that I'm going to do before then. Since I emailed you, I kind of moved things around.
Okay, well, so we'll just leave this up here then, and then when we go to MLK,
Yes.
I have a graphic for it. We can just we'll move to that then. So you can start now.
Yeah. So this is the cover from a book that came out probably in 2013, and it actually was the product of my my MFA dissertation. So yeah, so that's still in copper. I'm not reading anything from that though, because that's that's those poems are a little bit older.
Hank, is there any way you can maybe move up on the mic a little bit, because what we have it all the way on high, and it's a little quiet. Sorry.
Yeah, I don't usually have a problem. So. Yeah, let me know. Can you hear me?
I can't hear you, but it's a little weak though, and I have it up as high as it can go, so it's not much.
He needs to get closer to his mic.
Maybe you can go.
I can't get too much closer. I'd be sitting on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm using the mic from my laptop. So
Okay, it's not as good.
yeah, so I don't know. I mean, I've never had an issue with it before. Let me just make sure. Yeah, I have the volume up as high as it goes. Let me just see. Like the microphone system. No, that doesn't have. Let's see if I output. Wait, I'm trying to adjust the volume here. Is that better?
Yeah, it seems better.
Yes,
Okay. Took a second, but I figured out how to boost the mic. How to boost the mic to make this a little bit easier. So yeah, this first poem. I wrote shortly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine last year. I watched the Battleship Potemkin and was struck by a line in the movie, and it's the line that gives the poem its title. It's called "For a Spoonful of Borscht." War spreads across Ukraine like a purple stain, past Kiev, toward Lviv and the Polish border. A spoonful dripped across linens, spilled from a bowl on a jostled table. A diaspora of beetroots, fermented and boiled into soup. My grandpa ate borscht with boiled potatoes in his far Rockaway bungalow. My dad likes his with sour cream, bits of beets floating in a lilac sea. In Ukraine, we were Jews, she tells a reporter. In America, we are Russians, but in reality, we are from Ukraine. My grandpa was from Ternopil, now Ternopil, in West Ukraine, a Pole on his papers. His papa listed Austria, came just a few years before. Today in Ternopil, refugees amass, wait for passage, bodies sweeping west ahead of war. Putin demands old borders. In Eisenstein's film, The Sailor's Mutiny, a firing squad refuses to fire. The officers are tossed into the ocean. For a spoonful of borscht, a purple line on a map. So yeah, that was the for a spoonful of borscht was the rallying cry in the film for the Ukrainian soldiers. This one takes its title from Doctor Who, but it's actually about my mom. So it's called "Where the Time Lords Hide Their Essence." Containers multiply like fevered rabbits, like a crowd assembled to watch Petit above Lower Manhattan. Containers that tell her stories, store for her the soul and psyche, leaching her into another world. They come in here and move everything around. Take canisters from cabinets, searches, perhaps she's the doctor, a lost incarnation. Perhaps she will open the lid, retrieve the self. Even now, with her settled in the home, we find them filled with things we do not recognize, bits of data lost as she crosses into her parallel world. Trying not to read too quickly. Yeah, my mom was in a memory care home for a number of years before she passed last year. So that's kind of what, where that comes from. So this next poem is the Martin Luther King poem. It's called Memphis 1968, and it's tied to the Memphis trash workers, the garbage strike that took place in Memphis, and they brought King to Memphis right before he died, was killed. So, and I thought I'd read this. This is one of a couple of labor poems since I've been involved in the strike that was going on at Rutgers. I thought it was apropos to kind of touch base on some of the stuff that I've been working, kind of living with the last few weeks, last year, really. So this is Memphis 1968. Too late for Ecole Cole and Robert Walker. Crushed by the compacting plate, wet when wet wires shorted. Pronounced dead the same day, Elvis became a father, a story that led the local news. Smashed like ants as they hid from heavy Memphis rain, tucked under cans already scraped near clean for dinner. Chicken bones, potato peels, apple cores. On Monday, the trashman walked. Tied in a single garment of destiny, King said, take out the trash, clear the sewers, the toilets, field hand, pipe fitter, pharmacist, physician, all labor has worth. Black and white photo, American street, an army tank, a black man. The placard hangs from his neck like a cross. I am a man, it says, as if answering a question. It is a crime, King said, for people to live in this rich nation and receive starvation wages, to work and need food stamps, to miss work and not get paid, caught in the rain like strays, sniffing for meals, no shelter but the trash truck's grimy barrel, sitting in garbage with the maggots and rats, the lowest of God's creatures. We are God's children, King said, and we shot him. So this next one is, I don't know how much you guys know about the Black Sox scandal from 1919. It's really, this is more based on the book and the film. John Sayles made a film called Eight Men Out, based upon a book by Elliot Asanoff that told the story of the eight White Sox players who were accused and found guilty of gambling on games, the 1919 World Series. They were all expelled from baseball. There's still some question about how much or whether Buck Weaver actually was involved in the plot. And Buck Weaver kind of is centered in this poem. So this is called Black Sox Scandal. And it has an epigraph it says, I decided to keep quiet and play my best. George Buck Weaver. Dead ball era, dead game. Before the Babe beat it out of Boston and built the house in the Bronx. Slap hits, stolen bases, home run Baker never hit more than 12, but led the AL 3 times. You've seen the pictures, tiny gloves, white faces. It was a game back then, that's what they say. Buck Weaver fixed cars, paid his bills with off-season work. Baker was a Maryland farmer, Tigers, Yankees, St. Louis Browns, pharmacists, miners, salesmen, summer games, winter work. $2,000, $3,000, $5,000 if you're good. Do the math. Worth maybe $50,000 today. Try living on that in Jersey, Chicago, New York. What did Comiskey make? Brzee, Friedman, Connie Mack? Comiskey, tightest owner in baseball. That's what Gandil said. Roughneck first baseman, off-season plumber, ringleader. grand conspirator. 7 hits and 30 at-bats in that Thrones series. 8-man band, Chick and the Swede, Lefty and the knuckleballing Psychot, Buck, Hap, Joe, McMullen, the backup. Jackson hit .375 in 8 games, drove in 6. Illiterate linthead, sharecropper's son. He couldn't have understood what he'd done, but why not? He took the cash, played the games, became a legend. Shoeless Joe, he died playing ball in the backwoods after his banned from the big leagues, disappearing in silence as others battle about his guilt. But I wonder about Buck Weaver, Black Sox third sacker, played like a champ in the Thrones series, or so the story goes. Hit .324, only Joe did better. Prusak played him as the loyal loser. Knew but didn't tell. Landis banned him with the others, kept the owners whole. Buck sued, Buck fought, Buck could never clear his name. But maybe the focus is off. Perhaps it's Comiskey we should talk about, or Clark Griffith, raking in the dough the owners always did well. In the ballparks, the mines, the car plants, garment houses, hired the Pinkertons, kept the peace, but Psychot had it right. Actually straight-haired in Sale's movie version. Without us, there ain't a ball game, but who is it holding the money? Now, there's another John Sayles film, and it stars some straight-haired. It's called Matewan, which is a film about the Matewan, about a pretty violent mine strike, I think in West Virginia, or it could have been Kentucky. I honestly don't remember off the top of my head. The strike was violent. The movie is violent, and this is really based on the movie. And the title is actually the first line of the poem. It's sort of a ghazal. A ghazal is a Middle Eastern or Arabic poetry form that generally has repeated phrases throughout. So this is called In John Sayles' Matewan. In John Sayles' Matewan, the dead mark time in coal dust and sulfur. I saw it in muted tones on TV, in Mary McConnell's eyes, in the Baldwin thugs left inert along the main road by the rooming house, in Bloody Mingo, bloodshot eyes, watching late, writing about a union walkout, AC casino workers gambling against snake eyes. You lose. That's how the game is played. Paychecks, healthcare, they fight you for every penny. Look in their eyes. Look, he says, it was lunchtime, summertime, union talk at the Trenton plant. I was a kid hiding from the boss's eyes, watching lunch break card games, poker, rummy, union flyer, passed to the wrong guy. A fight breaks out, a blackened eye. No vote, no union, no plant. Closed the next year, fled to Georgia, bad hand, bad bluff, it's in the eyes. He calls, turn your cards, a losing hand. Close the doors, no more gamblers, no more jobs. And on screen, Mary's eyes glow as she plugs the murderous Hickey, strikebreaker, Baldwin thug. He and his gunmen dimmed Stryker's eyes, kept coming until Mary, as Edna, fired into his gut. Bloody street, bloody Mingo, blood of history, and her eyes like coal dust, like gunpowder, all of it in her eyes. I'm just going to read a couple of more. Let's see that. We were in Nashville a few years ago. I'm trying to see what I got here. 2 more, really. We were in Nashville a few years ago, and we went to a place called Acme Grain and Seed, I think is what it was called. And there was a band that was playing. We were there with some friends. And they were just a cover band. But we'd also been to the Country Music Hall of Fame, and I'm a bit of a music nerd. So This poem, Ghosts at the Acme, I wrote because the lead singer of the band bore a striking resemblance, I thought, to Graham Parsons. And some of the lines in this poem are kind of borrowed from some of his songs and from some old country songs. So, Ghosts at the Acme. No grievous angels, these kids in cowboy hats, singing cigarettes and whiskey, pedal steel soaring below, wild, wild women, the drummer driving the band with a whip, the baby-faced singer with Graham Parsons' hair, eyes, 2 stage lights cutting through the funk. They'll drive you crazy, he croons. They'll drive you insane. This song's never. Are we still on? Yeah, we're still okay. Okay. I'm going to start that over. I got a call that was coming in the middle of this, and it very disrupting. Okay, so let me do this again. Ghosts at the Acme. Sorry about that. No grievous angels, these kids in cowboy hats, singing cigarettes and whiskey, pedal steel soaring below wild, wild women, the drummer driving the band with a whip, the baby-faced singer with the Graham Parsons hair, eyes, 2 stage lights cutting through the funk. They'll drive you crazy, he croons. They'll drive you insane. This song's never sounded so wise. Its skin rubbed red, tingling with the soul of old Nashville. These new pioneers of the sacred sound, unbowed by honky-tonk angels calling for Skinnerd covers as beer and bourbon pour onto lower Broadway like 2 drunks from Quebec, as the Cumberland flows like the Willie Nelson song. And the last poem uses also mentions ghosts. It's called Chasing Ghosts, not goats, ghosts. And it kind of looks back when I was like 19 or 20, kind of enamored by Jack Kerouac and punk rock and all of that. So now that I've gotten old, this poem kind of sums up some things for me, I think. It's called Chasing Ghosts. Long hair and leather jackets, looking for space in which to be closer to a truth we couldn't know. Reading Kerouac by bare bulb at 3 a.m. No time to sleep. Drive a van daytime, get high at night and talk. Play guitar, spin some vinyl. Miles, Bruce, The Clash, talk. Dylan, Train, The Beatles, more talk. Lou chases God with a fender and heroin spike. Blue mask pulled taut across his rage. Iggy writhes and buries ennui in layers of cool. He was chairman of the board. We, his trustees, seeking something distant, a perfect knowledge, a knowable, a transcendent high. We wandered Asbury Park streets one night on acid, chasing ghosts. We knew all and nothing. Turned collars to the sky like the posers we were. I bumped against a sidewalk bench, tore my jeans, blood trickling down my leg. Kerouac in my back pocket, winked knowingly. We laughed, cheetahs shedding spots. And when the trip turned dark, the sky black, I snuck off, crept down to the ocean, stared out through chemical filter at the hard line barely visible in the dark. If God existed, it was there, where sky and sea met. Or maybe God is a water tower in Davenport, a ghostly hobo wandering the Susquehanna. Clash chords roll on the waves, Kerouac on the beach by moonlight. Perhaps there was no God, perhaps, and after all these years, I still don't know. So that's what I got today. So, okay. Questions? I don't know what the process is here.
Well, the process is Ed's going to start. He's reading his poems, and he's got we have pictures that accompany it. It's 17 poems that are about some of the houses and buildings in South Brunswick. And
Okay.
we go from here. But thank you, though. Thanks for coming out.
Well, don't we have any questions?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, any questions? I'm sorry.
You can ask me questions. Yeah, I don't know how long I can stay after that, but yeah.
Funny. Does anybody have a question?
Is Rutgers gonna win the strike?
Some people think we did. Some people, I would hope so. since I've been one of the ringleaders. I hope we do. We've made some gains.
Well, it ain't over till it's over.
Well, we don't have a contract. At least I don't believe so. That's what that call could have been. We paused the strike, meaning that technically we could go out at any time. No, we haven't taken anything off the table, but we're still negotiating, and hope, we want to get this thing done. But there are some significant raises built in, but there's some other issues that really need to be addressed. So that's the short version of of the strike info.
Hank, I wanted to ask you if you could pigeonhole yourself as to what type of poet you are. I get the feeling from the ones that you read, you're a contemporary issue poet. Does that sort of fit what your description would be of yourself?
Well, I would definitely fit in a more contemporary vein. I don't use rhyme. I don't usually do formal writing. Mostly it's open form verse. People call it free verse. It's really, I call it open form because there is an underlying form to most of it. I tend to write about the stuff that's going on in the world and around me. So yeah, I mean, that comes up. But as you saw, I mean, I had a poem about my mom and the Alzheimer's that she was dealing with, and I've been a reporter for so long and a political columnist and an editorial writer that all that stuff is kind of, I think, mixed in together at this point. I think that in any given poem, any of that stuff could kind of make its way in, whether it's something political or something about baseball or basketball or something about my family or but yeah, I mean, I think that my approach is definitely more in a contemporary modern side.
Okay. And then my second question, they talk about a poet finding their voice. And I noticed when you're reading your poetry, there's a pacing to it. And I wonder if you're consciously doing that. In other words, the spaces in between your words and so forth, those are supposed to be important in poetry. And the time that you take going from line to line. Are you working on that? Are you conscious of that?
I am when I read it, yeah. And when I write it, when I go back and I do revision, one of the things that I focus on a lot is where that line should break. Is it where the appropriate break is? I've been writing a lot more prose lately, long essays than I have been writing poetry. So I haven't focused as much on the line break recently, but I do. I mean, that's, when I try after I've written something to read it aloud to see where the breaks belong. Sometimes the idea is to find the break and make it a surprising space, so that the reader's not expecting the line to break there. Sometimes it's about just wanting to get a half breath in there. The poet Denise Levertov talks about how line breaks in free verse or open form verse are sort of like notations in music, and it's like, as you said, right? It's about that pacing. It really does dictate. Those should dictate the way the poem moves down the page or how it's read aloud.
Okay, great, thank you. Does anybody have anything?
Did you have a mentor since your time on Oakey Drive that led you into poetry?
Did I have a mentor? Who was asking that? I'm gonna.
This is Paul Weiner, 2 houses down from you.
Oh, there's Paul Weiner. There's Marion's husband.
Yeah, old neighbors. Oh my God. Did I have a mentor? Not on Okie Drive. I didn't. I found poetry when I went to Penn State after I graduated high school, and I just kind of was self-taught for a while. But then I've had a couple of mentors as I went through school. The poet Laurie Scheck.
I saw him today.
I'm sorry, what?
Somebody, I think, said they saw him today.
Who?
I don't know.
So yeah, so the poet Laurie Scheck was a mentor at Rutgers when I was an undergraduate, and then some friends of mine who've been influential in kind of helping me kind of keep going when sometimes you just don't want to write poetry anymore because nobody wants to read it. A poet named Elliot Katz was really big. I had a friend of mine named Jim Lukács. And then later on, when I got my MFA, Kathleen Graber, David Daniel, both of them, Renee Ashley, all of them were really important in kind of helping me not develop a voice, but to articulate it better, to kind of chip away at some of the stuff that was getting in the way of my voice coming through. So actually, Kathleen and Renee both read in the South Brunswick Poetry series that we used to run. That I was running way. You remember, Ed, right? When was that? Right? Seems so long ago. Yeah, it's because Ed read during that at one point as well.
We call that the Stone Age.
The Stone, exactly, it was the Stone Age. So.
Anybody have another question?
Yeah, I was just wondering, Hank, do you do any local news reporting, and how do you, where do you write? I know you have a Twitter account, and where else do you post things like that?
I have a piece that came out today in the Progressive magazine. I've written for NJ Spotlight. I don't have a regular gig anymore, aside from the teaching. So I write a lot on my Substack. I have a Substack newsletter that I've been running. So I write as you know, sometimes once a week there, or sometimes like the last couple of weeks, it's been every single day. So it can be reporting, sometimes it's opinion pieces. Mondays I usually try and devote to something music related. So I do that. But yeah, I've been writing for the Progressive probably more than other places lately. So yeah, I mean, I'm not doing any real local stuff anymore. Sadly, the outlets are gone. You know, there is really nothing covering our town, which is painful for me, since I spend so much time with the Post. You know, the fact that the Post is gone and that there's nothing that's replaced it at all. Yeah, that troubles me.
Yeah, we're hurting too, because Seal Edom, who was the township historian, she used to collect all the news about the town and from the newspaper and so forth, and that's vanished.
Yeah.
And it's really hurt our archives because we're losing out on what's been going on in the last several years.
Yeah, it used to be when, you can go like to the Home News or maybe the Star Ledger if there's like a big crime or some kind of major controversy. But we did everything. The Post cover. We wrote about people who were painters in the community, or almost if basically everybody has a story to tell is the way we approached it when I was the editor. And if we could figure out a way to tell everybody's story, we were going to try and do that. And that connection to the community, it's just gone. It's not there. Not having that local newspaper as a place that people can go to find things out is unfortunate. And then you end up with some of the social media accounts where local rumor flies around, and you have you don't have somebody to kind of sort through that stuff anymore. You have to make a decision on your own.
Okay. Thank you, Hank. Very
Thanks,
good.
Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, I have to jump on a call. It's been crazy with the Rutgers strike and the end of the semester. Everything seems to all come to a head at the same time. So, but I appreciate you having me, giving me a chance to read. If you,
We're going to invite you back next April too.
I'll be back. It's a little. I have to look at my calendar. I may be booked for that. So yeah, no, I would always come in. I love doing the reading series that we had too, but poetry is an acquired taste, and not a lot of people have it. I'm glad you guys gave me a chance to read and to talk a little bit. So I'm sorry I can't stick around, Ed. I would love to hear it, but
right. You're a busy man. I'm not, so I'm here.
I should just retire, is what it is.
That's right. It's great.
All right. So thanks so much. If you guys want to get in touch, you guys can go through Randy. If you have any questions, or anything else you want to ask me. So thanks a lot, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
What I wanted to say to sort of tie this in, and I tried to mention the thing about Hank being a contemporary poet. I'm not. So tonight you're getting remember, you all know the scene of the three witches in Macbeth. Do you know what the three witches stand for? What they're supposed to be symbolizing? Anybody know?
You'll tell us.
I will.
I did.
Definitely will tell you.
I did back in high school, I knew.
In Celtic time, before the Romans beat heads and messed up the Celts, they of course had the Druids. They had the witches and the warlocks. And they had an oral tradition, and that's what poetry comes out of, an oral tradition. But what they needed to do was to have somebody who was responsible for the fates. And they figured out that there are three fates. There's the past fate, the present fate, and the future fate. And there was so much to worry about that they had three people doing that. That's why there are three witches in Shakespeare's play, because one represents past fate, present fate. And remember that they're talking about Macbeth and what's going to happen and all that. Well, tonight you're getting, you just received the present fate. In other words, social issues. And he's not going back that far in time. So if you take 100 years of time and you call that your present, that was Hank Kalet tonight. Okay, so he's the bard of the present fate. Because I'm much older than Hank, I have to take the responsibility of being the bard of past fate. And I go way back, okay? And the booklet that you see in front of you came out of an idea from Frenchtown, where a poet up in Frenchtown wrote in the similar vein that Hank Kalet's poetry is in, the free verse and so forth, about places in Frenchtown, which is sort of an artist community on the Delaware River, okay? And so my son got me a copy of it, and I told Randy when I just showed him it, hey, we could do this. We could write about places in South Brunswick. We're sort of looked down upon. We're like Avis compared to Princeton. We're like Avis compared to New Brunswick and Rutgers and all that. So the thing is, we try harder. And so this is what the booklet is all about. I picked out 17 places. Why 17? In the craft of poetry, there's a couple of reasons why. One, it alliterates with South Brunswick, 17 and South, that type of thing. And that's about, I was exhausted. After I did 17, I thought, I'm not going to do 18 or 19 or 20. I'm not going to work on a score. So 17 it is. But the potential here is that there will be another 17. and another 17 after that, because South Brunswick is filled with a lot of stuff that nobody knows about. And since we don't have a newspaper anymore, it's hard for the people to know what's going on in the town. So one of my jobs, and Randy's job too, as the computer tech and all that, and running a lot of stuff in the library, is to bring the information to the people in the town. In other words, we have all these archives with all this information. Seal Edom did a great job of getting it all together, but then it's got to get out to the people. So this is one of the things that we're talking about. And Randy, I don't know what order you have there.
We
but...
start with the book, so we're starting with the mill.
Okay. The first one is The Old Mill. That's the title that I have, and it's Davidson's Mill. And Davidson's Mill is no longer there, but the pond is there, and the wall, but the dam is still there. And there's a nice park there, and it's right on Riva Avenue there, right near Old George's Road and right near 130. So you can go there and visit.
Yeah.
Right?
If you know where Riva Avenue is.
You can check it out, yeah.
Terry's good.
Yep.
Okay. So that's the first one I'll be reading, and that's the mill when it was in existence.
What year was that?
Okay, that photograph, I guess, would be turn of the century.
Yeah, I'd say that.
I'd say turn of the
Yeah.
century. I don't think we have a year on that thing.
Did something motivate you to pick these houses? There's something about the house that made you want to write about it?
Well, that's in the see, first of all, you have to figure out, is the subject that you picked out worth writing a poem about? And it has to have something. In other words, the archival information, which I use as my basis, okay, has to give me some sort of kernel, some sort of seed. If I plant that seed and then the thing grows and the verses start to flow, then I got myself a poem. Now, to get these 17, I had to get rid of about 30 that didn't go anywhere. Okay. So it's labor intensive. What you have to do is the research to get it, because if you're the historical bard, the past history, you have to rely on the sources to tell you, because you didn't live it. See, this came before your time period. So then you have to rely on the sources to bring it to life. And that's basically what the poem does. It brings to life something that happened in the past. Okay?
So is this 1800, 1900, or 1900, 2000?
Well, this goes back, the mill goes back to the late 1700s. Okay? And when you say Davidson Mill, there was a controversy over whether it was Davison or Davidson. And nowadays we say Davidson with the D in the middle. But as you'll see through the poem, there are many owners of this mill. And it's just that the Davidson name stuck with the place. Okay, so let me read it, and then you can ask some questions on it. Okay, the old mill. A week into spring, on the ass end of March, orphaned winter winds niggle the dark waters of Lawrence Brook at night in the halcyon year of 1954. Everything's as it should be along silent Sapling Ridge and the brooding expanse of Pigeon Swamp nearby. Hundreds of years of history surround an old mill there. A rambling wooden frame 3 stories high stands humbly proud, housing only ghosts now, sorting the gossip, tales, rumors, and complaints of locals who came and went since 1733, when Willie Cox's sawmill stood. This place changed hands many, many times since Peter Sonman's sold to Cox. Folks once called it Lawrence's Mill, then Van Pelt's, off and on. Davison's till Davidson stuck, when 2 stories were added and its grist mill turned corn to bran for livestock feed. gave folks an excuse to gather. Close to 9 p.m., chilly still, the ghosts are about to tackle memories threshed upon the floors and dancing in the musty air. Reminiscences of more recent times when Beekman, Vanderwater, Werner, Atkinson, and Beloff owned the mill in turn. Till Stanhope Nixon came along to fix the dam, spillways, and wheels. Initial witnesses claim the fire started on the second floor, flames reddening obsidian skies, coaxed by dunning breezes, consuming the mill's wooden skin. Firemen from Brunswick North, Monmouth Junction, Maple Mead arrived too late to save the day. Charred bones of thickest wood and mounds of ash remain. So sad the loss, this rustic monument, a towering black skeleton now. Even the Haints have abandoned and most folks have forgot. But perhaps like the ancient phoenix, something new will rise to life. A park by chance, sporting a familiar name, where folks can find some excuse to gather again on sacred land, fish the Farrington, trace ghost marks, left where the old mill stood. And there's a photo, a reproduction of it. Yeah, that's how it basically looks today.
This is right after it burned. We're lucky enough to get this photo somebody donated.
It was for 5 million.
Yeah, that's the mill that the dam is right to the left. And then today you can see that's what it looks like today.
Yeah, and this mill, when it was up and running, was a great gathering place. You know, South Brunswick Township being a farming community. And, you know, we've always joked about where's the center of town?
Yeah.
Where is it? And back in the day, the mill was the center of town. Now, we were lucky to have more than one mill. So you had centers. And that's one reason why you have these separate areas of South Brunswick. You have Dayton, which used to be called back in the old days Crossroads. You have Monmouth Junction, okay? You have Kingston, you have Deans. So you have several places. And in each one of these places, you had mills where there was a stream, where there was a waterway. And so these became the centers of town, very important. This is where you found out what was going on.
What powered this mill?
It was water power.
It was all water?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, the spillway that you see there, the mill was running off that runoff that that was coming there.
It's really worth a visit. It's very pretty there, and there's a park. You can park right almost where that little spillway is right there, and you can just get the idea. If you look up on the hill, you can see the old mill house. What was that called, Ed? You look up the hill up Riva. That was where there's a name for that house. It was
Nixon, I think. Isn't that the Nixon house?
I don't know, but it's a pretty nice, nice looking house
Yeah, I
up
think
there.
that's the Nixon house.
There's a
Yeah.
pretty park, there's little garden areas. Once you go up a little bit further and go into the section, and some women was walking past.
There's a butterfly
it's
house
great.
too. I think.
Butterfly
Yeah,
house,
they have it's
gardens,
sort of-
natural
It's
plantings.
sort of a greenways type
center.
of thing, you know, that you had picnicking there, you had fishing there, and you know, canoeing and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a great tourist attraction.
I thought that was East Brunswick.
It's not.
It was both, kind of
Well,
like.
you're
Well,
close to
It's
close
on
to
the
the
border,
border.
yeah.
Yeah.
Barrington Lake, they call East Brunswick, so it is right there. That's the border, right?
Yeah, when you go up to
yeah.
Rogers Lane, it's East Brunswick up there.
Kirshner Lane, I know is East Brunswick, I used to live there. That's what's right off the way.
What do we have next?
The next one is the Three Ghosts game.
Oh,
It's a mill. Yeah.
one of my favorites. I wrote it.
Oh, surprise.
What is it? Three Ghosts?
This is the Van Dyke
Van Dyke
Farm.
Farm, yeah.
As you know, warehouses are creeping and growing in South Brunswick. And the Van Dyke Farm was one of those places that was saved from the possibility of the acreage turned into warehouses. So I wrote this poem, and what I wanted to do was get into the history of the place. So as I read it, you can sort of gauge that and see for yourself whether I
And this is still
got it or
standing.
not.
This is standing now?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, 3 ghosts came. There's a date that goes with this too, October 22nd, 2009. You'll see why as I read it. Soft blue sky and cotton clouds behind Old Glory rising on a tall pole at the site of a broken stone. Folks paying homage to a war hero back away from the family grave site to join the dignitaries gathering out front. Colonel Johnny Van Dyke emerges from the soil, flicks dirt from his rusty scabbard, and follows those who'd left him behind. Mayor Frank Gambitese and Freeholder Barrett emerge from the house to be dedicated. EVA's Gene Dvorak leads them and others. After a tour of the tiny slave quarters and the trap door down to the kitchen and narrow stairs with the urn type rail, Amy, a pallid African girl, trails them, smoothing her hand-me-down linen dress with calloused hands seasoned for menial work. Important souls, local activists, residents, and such gather on the Van Dyke porch and lawn for the long-sought ribbon-cutting ceremony. Baykeeper sent Greg Ramaud Greenstein from the state. Bill Klemowitz stands with the caretakers, Roland and Sue. Even a former owner's daughter stands with the rest. The progenitor, sheerly beaming, keeps hushed way in the back, shoulder to shoulder with a psychic named Reich, whom folks claim is nearly right half the time. On drone the speeches glorifying a 300-year-old house and hundreds of acres preserved abutting the swamp and now protected from a developer's fate. The praise and potential of these mud-packed walls, the vernacular frame of 2+ stories well kept, and secrets hiding with foundation stones does end. John, the elder, Colonel Johnny, and little Amy watched the celebrants leave the way they came, till but a pair of guests remain. Seal Leadham, the accomplished township historian, is accosted by an animated Miss Reich, who's babbling on and on about seeing phantoms. 3 of them I sensed and I saw with my own eyes. 3 ghosts came to this glorious affair. Ms. Leadham nodded knowingly, fails to scold a half-truth. The slave girl, the colonel, and the eldest Van Dyke share a laugh, then head for their appointed haunts, happy to know they never came, for they had never left. Now, there's a lot of local stuff in there, and I threw a lot of contemporary names in there, and of course, the old times, and the ghosts are real. Those are real people. The family that had this, the Van Dykes, had quite a few slaves. And that's one issue in South Brunswick that people tend to ignore, and I like to bring that to light. And I tell you, I get emotional about it, but remember when we had the outdoor meeting? And I read off the slaves' names?
Yep.
That had never been done before. In other words, an honor roll of people who have been forgotten in South Brunswick. And now they're remembered. And I thought that was great. So when I wrote this poem, I had that in mind too. And so I hope you liked it.
How did you get the names of the slaves? Usually they're referred to as property, not by name.
Because you do a lot of hunting. It's sort of like your metal detecting. You can scan and scan and scan, and finally you find a nugget. Then you go over here and you find something. But all the time that you took in between, we have, C.O. Edom did a great job with getting names and so forth. One of the ways you get them is to read the wills of the people back then. Because that's a time when some of the slaves got their freedom. It's also sadly to report when some slaves were transferred to somebody else. And so their slavery continued. And so you can get a lot of the names from the wills. And in the wills, only the first name is given. Now I'm working on the time period of South Brunswick history leading up to 1800. So I'm going from 1775 to 1800. And I'm finding more names as I go along. So my list of slaves and also free African Americans in South Brunswick, there were a number of them also. They have been forgotten and they have to be remembered. So as I progress on this history of South Brunswick, I will be getting as many names as I possibly can. And we have an estimate from the census at the time, 1800, 1790 and so forth, as to how many African Americans were in the area. You got to keep in mind that South Brunswick back then was not just South Brunswick, but it was all the way down to Province Line Road. So you're talking about part of Princeton. You're talking about, let me see, what am I trying to think of? Plainsboro. You're talking about Cranberry and you know, that whole area. And so it's a little difficult to try to separate the ones that were actually in South Brunswick. But one of the ways you could do that is to check the slave owners. And we have some accounts of the slaves. We also have burial sites and we have slaves buried. We can't find the stones for most of them or markers, but we can find the names. Okay, so we do have a list. We have a very, very extensive list, but not complete yet.
Sometimes muster rolls will mention a first name and then they'll put next to it a Negro of so and so. They'll at least mention a name in the muster rolls. And so also, I did a paper on this for a blog where a lot of times they would actually have their slaves substitute for them during the Revolutionary War. That's my thing. Substitute for their service in the militia.
Right.
Instead of them going, they're going to send somebody else in their stay.
Right.
So usually it was a slave or whatever, or they pay, or the rich people would pay somebody to do it, which is very lucrative back then.
Right, and to add to that, there were several blacks in the Revolutionary War who put down that they were Native American.
Oh, yeah.
So that they would be able to fight. Okay. And so that clouds the issue, you know, when you're trying to find out who was there at that time, you know, that type of thing.
Is this farm on Ridge Road? Is that a Van Dyke farm?
This is on, the address is right there, Davison Mill Road.
Oh, is
It's on
that
Davison
Davis?
Mill, yeah. It's down in the corner there.
I know that, yeah.
Okay, Randy, we're all set.
Do we know
Just
anything about the house? I'd love to know, you know, how the house was arranged for the slaves and such.
Well, I could only go by what the sources said, you know, but as I understand, the typical thing was that the house slaves' quarters were very close, next to or on top of where the kitchen was. Now, back in colonial times, if you could afford it, you would have the kitchen separate from the main house because of fires. and the slaves would be with that kitchen house. But if the kitchen were in the house, the manse, then the slaves would be, house slaves would be associated with that. And that I sort of indicate that the female slave is, her quarters are in there.
I think they found some evidence of living quarters on off Davisonville Road. I talked to some guy who was investigating it in our town, and he was documenting these homes that were slave quarters off Davisonville.
What was that?
Well, there's a New York Times article about this house. So if you Google it, you can actually get it because it's from the 90s.
This
You actually
got
read it.
national headlines, because of the preserving the property and all that, so the warehouses wouldn't get it. But I'm trying to think who that guy was. Was that Shackelford?
Yeah.
Shackelford, yeah.
Yeah. He's the guy.
I talked to
that,
him,
yeah.
when I was in.
He was looking around for slave burial grounds in South
Yeah,
Brunswick.
James Shackelford.
And so work has been done, but it's not. It hasn't. It's like scratching the surface. I mean, there's so much more to do. That's why Randy and I have to visit the grave sites coming up very soon.
We're gonna take a road trip.
Yeah, we gotta go through the poison ivy and all that again.
Yeah.
They're all overgrown. It's unbelievable. The township says, oh, yeah, we maintain the property, blah, blah, blah. It's not that way at all.
Can we get the high school kids or the scouting groups to adopt some of those things? Or-
Well, the scouts have been better than the high school kids. I've tried a thing with an archaeological dig site for, like we had in New Brunswick. And it's fallen on deaf ears. People don't want to deal with it. But we keep trying. Okay, Randy,
Just
what do
to
you got?
follow
now?
up on this, if I may.
Yeah.
You had asked Hank how important it was to have the breaks and pauses.
Mhm.
And I'm just curious if the title of this, The Three Ghosts, has anything to do with the fact that every third paragraph is indented?
Yeah, that's good. You hit upon a form
okay.
technique. Yeah, when a poet sets apart lines, it's for emphasis, and it's also an intriguing thing. Call and response. Call and response is a big thing. In other words, let's say the preacher is calling, and then the participants in the ceremony are responding. Okay, so there's that call and response in there. It's setting it off. But yeah, it's there, and that there were three ghosts. Well, I just told you about the three witches. If I wrote this poem and had two people coming out of graves or coming out of the house, it wouldn't have the impact, the gravitas that three would have, because three is a mystical, magical number. Okay. So there's a lot in the poem. I don't want to get into it too deeply, but there's a lot in Hank's poetry that you can't really, in other words, if you got his book and you looked at it and so forth, there'd be another dimension to the poetry, because there's a lot in his free verse stuff that he has. In my stuff, I'm more of a stickler for form than he is. See, his line, if you saw his lines, a lot of his lines are very long, and you could get lost in the lines. It's hard to get lost in my lines. Okay. And so it's called framing the poem. And I'm doing a lot of framing the poem. And so you hit up on one of those things. Very good. You get an A, you get a gold.
Oh, gee.
Is this called something or is this poem called something?
What's that?
Is this poem called something?
Probably Belding number 14. I have to give away secrets, when I talk about this stuff. I did say at the beginning that I have to find something to build the poem around. I have to find a kernel of something to do it. that, for me, it comes from the history. In other words, I have to start with something that's factual. And then I can build around it and I can add fiction to it. I can fill in where the history doesn't provide the information. But the form evolves. So in other words, when I start a poem, I don't know what the form will be. The form will come out of the thing of it. In other words, I might start with just a line. And depending on how long that line is, that might determine how long the other lines are. Okay? That these are somewhat narrow lines that evolved. That's an evolutionary thing. And I have to fit the facts in. But basically, any poem, if you're really into poetry, whether you're writing it or reading it or whatever, you have to have a beginning. You have to have something that attracts the reader, okay, or the listener. Then you give a laundry list, a shopping list in the middle of a poem. You can say anything you want, blah, 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 okay? So you make that list. Then you have to have a universal at the end of the poem and have something that gives you a feeling. And a poem is not going to answer your questions. A poem is going to raise questions. So a good poem is going to challenge you to wonder about more than, oh yeah, I get that, like reading a history textbook. Because what I'm doing here, I'm writing history, but I'm writing it in a certain way. And so I have to follow the rules and regulations of poetry, because that's the medium that I'm working in. Okay. And these books that you see here, this one, and this one, are all in poetic form, but they're history. But they're in poetic form. And that's why they're not published, because publishers don't want to do it. They want prose form. If you're writing history, it's got to be in prose form, because your reader won't tolerate it. And if you look at those and you see the notes that are about it, holy cow, look at all this history. Where did all this come from? And, that's the challenge.
Well, Shakespeare had the same infrastructure when he was writing the sonnets and poetry that.
Well, we don't know really who Shakespeare was, so we can't pin him down. But he would have, he wrote about all the kings and all that stuff, so he would have to know his history. But you got to keep in mind, in those days, the oral tradition of history was much stronger than it is today. So he could grab stuff that, kids knew, were told, and passed down from generation to generation. And he was a genius. Okay. Hank and I are not geniuses. Okay. Well, we're just local talent.
And a lot more poetry was out. I can speak for the 50s, 60s, even up into the 70s, and then it just disappeared.
Well,
it's nice to see it, or did it go to a
there's a
different
word
format?
for it. It's called transmogrified.
Okay.
And I just made it up. No, it's a real word. Transmogrified means that you take something and it goes through a process, it morphs, and it becomes out this way. If you take your rap poetry, rap music, and all that stuff, this is one of the latest things in the evolution of poetic form. It's still poetic form. In some cases, it's like an arrested state of poetic form, because it's so locked in to like a sing-song type rhyme stuff. But things were getting pretty wild back in the 50s. He had mentioned Kerouac, and you got Allen Ginsberg, New Jersey guy. I think one of the greatest things you could do if you really wanted to study it is check Allen Ginsberg's father's poetry. He was a teacher up in Paterson, New Jersey. And you check Allen Ginsberg's poetry, and you see the generational difference, because when Allen Ginsberg comes along, they're revolutionizing poetry. Okay, the beat poets and all that. And Hank's big on the beat poets. And I am, but in a comical sort of way. sort of like a Percy Dove Tonsils sort of way. Do you know who Percy Dove Tonsils is? Anybody know?
Sounds funny.
Mhm.
Penny, you have to know who Percy Dove Tonsils is.
You're dating yourself.
Remember the comedian Ernie Kovacs?
Mhm.
I was watching him on the computer today.
Bilko.
I was gonna say,
Yeah.
if somebody asked me, who are my, you know, like, Hank mentioned his mentors and his sources and so on. If somebody asked me that, I'm always a wise guy, I say, oh, Percy Dove Tonsils, of course. And Ernie Kovacs on his show used to have a little segment, and Percy Dove Tonsils would give this horrible poetry. I mean, it was so pathetic, it was funny and comical, and that's the main thing that he wanted to do. But Percy Dove Tonsils and me and the Beat Poets and so on, that's where we meet. You know, like I might take some of their ideas and do humorous type poetry. Okay, but I don't really take it too seriously. Nah. Okay, what's the next one?
Whitlock.
Yeah.
Whitlock. Okay, everybody knows the Whitlock Inn. They probably know it most famously as Fat Eddie's. Okay. And this is right in the middle of Crossroads, now called Dayton. And it's still standing. It's been refurbished a bit and changed ownership a lot of times. And I call this the heart of Crossroads. And as I say, that's the old name for Dayton. And this has a different form. And obviously it's a rhythm type poem. And the beat is, of course, on once, and then it spews forth after that. Once, a long, long time ago, more than 200 years before the War of Independency, old James Whitlock dreamed of building his own public house along George Riscaric's Pike at the 5 corners of Crossroads. Once his dream turned into action, beam by beam, brick by brick, a 2 1/2 story inn, true to the stock Georgian plan, rose to rake a southward sky, crowned by a slate gable roof and chimneys stout and strong. Once proper folk were welcomed here for fancy banquets, voting, public meetings, and the like. Coach travelers came and went, walking the wide board floor, admiring hand-carved banisters, mantel, grand fireplace. Once, country fairs were held here on the ground, second Tuesday of each month, when merchants came with ware-filled wagons, luring folks, proper or not, who thanked the second owner, mine host, James Barraclough. Once, cattle drovers on starry nights came to rest their weary bones before heading on to market, Philadelphia or New York, halfway with livestock safely penned in third owner Will Skank's yard, and they asleep in the carriage house. Once this venerable Whitlock Inn, then Barraclough Tavern, changed owners many times. After Skank came LaForge, then Manning, Erickson, Evans, Fat Eddie Gromes, and more. But the place still proudly stands, the heart of Crossroads. Now, there's a lot in there. And I don't know if you want to ask any questions about it. But there's lines in there. In other words, this is the type of poem that deserves a second reading. I'm not going to read it a second time because you can look at it and see it. That's why I provided the copies. I think it's great when you're able to look at it while the person is reading. And I wish that we had Hank's poems, because Hank's poems, as I say, with the long lines and so forth, and the trying to pay attention to the details that he has in there. And he's got a ton of detailed stuff, contemporary stuff, basically. If you could see it, put your hands on it, look at it, that sort of thing, it'd be much more powerful.
Didn't Hank have like an agenda, a progressive agenda in his
Social
poems?
issues.
Yeah, yeah, it was very, left kind of thing.
Yeah, he and I, well, I'm not really political, but he's an activist. I mean, he's really involved. He's young enough to be an activist. I'm too old. I'm just an old codger. But the thing is, he takes it on the social issues. His poems about the homeless and all that, and the camps, the migrant camps and stuff like that. And he's got some powerful stuff, really, really powerful stuff. My stuff is way in the past, so you can't really get too worked up about the issues that are in there. But you can read between the lines and you can pick out a few things here and there.
So it's all close to prose. So is it just your personal preference to write it as poetry?
I've always had a thing with strict prose.
Yeah.
Is such a waste of words. But the problem is, poetry is very difficult to get published. You usually have to self-publish because people aren't going to buy it. It's just not, the market is just not there. And you know that books, as with anything else, it's all money driven. And if you can't sell, then you're just not going to do it. So what I do, I self-publish, and I like to write poetry because I guess I think that way. But the thing is, when I write these accounts, like I have the mystery thing, the mysteries, right?
Yes.
The mysteries. She's reading the mysteries now. I have to do that in prose. I always sneak a little poetry in there somewhere.
You do.
So I fall back on it. And there's a comfort level in it. And I started writing poetry when it was strange. I was at Ridgewood High School. And Ridgewood High School prided itself as this great institution of learning higher above anybody else in the state of New Jersey. And I came from Bloomfield, New Jersey to Ridgewood High. And I said, what a crock of crap this is. And I just didn't fit in. And so they had classes for people who didn't fit in. And I had Mr. Ogden, who a nickname the kids called him the Penguin. And he was sort of, like a bowling pin, something like that. So anyway, I thought he was great. He was my homeroom teacher. But he had a creative writing English class, and they put all the dunderheads in there that weren't doing well in the other things. And in those days with Sputnik and all that, it was math and science, math and science, math and science, math and science. I couldn't give a fig about math and science, okay? So I was taking modern European history, and I was a senior in a class of sophomores. I was the only senior taking modern European. Everybody else was taking chemistry and this advanced math, and they had all this advanced stuff, but I wasn't into it at all. Anyway, I got into this creative writing class, and that's where it took off. And Herbie Ogden was a character. He would take my poems, and he wouldn't say anything about them. And he just handed them back to me. He says, keep writing, keep writing. That's all he'd say, keep writing. So what a great teacher. So that's, I felt, in other words, that's my comfort level. I find
about all the trouble you got me in with your creative stuff.
That's another story.
When people ask me about my career, I tell stories about it.
Boy,
It was a great teacher, but it was.
The great teachers often go to the
I had to be
edge.
ready.
We had great times, I tell you. they allowed us to have great times for a time. And,
Could be censored today.
but that's another session. Randy, I have to schedule another session.
Yes, that's
Next, April, we'll do it.
So have you
Okay.
published this? This is a self-published book.
This is brand new.
I see.
This is only, what would you say, 2 months old?
Yeah. something like that.
I had to put it together, but it took me about 6 months to write. And about 2 months to redo it and finally get it printed. But all I do, I go to one of the print places to get the covers done. And you see, what I'm trying to do in the South Brunswick Library is to get people to submit their poems so that we can have, these are what we might call very small chapbooks. And Randy and I call them chap booklets. Okay. And we're trying to get people to chime in, like you guys get your poetry in and so forth. Randy and I will go through them and we'll come up with a new booklet. We have one, I have one now for every month of the year. And we put them out on display. We've only had 2 stolen so far. Since we started putting them out in October. And you're supposed to read it in the library and put it back on the shelf, okay? And that's a pretty good average since we've been working on it since October. And Randy's name mysteriously shows up in the December one.
Oh, yeah.
But we have all these here, and you can avail yourself of them. There will be on the shelf. And this will be the new one. That'll come out for May. And these are what I call my Kendall Park poems. And they were all done while living in Kendall Park, which I still live there. But a lot of them were done on Constable Road. And they go back quite a few years. But anyway, some of them are historical and some of them are topical, thematic, that type of thing.
Is there something comparable? When I was a young kid and I went to the village, a lot of the coffee shops would have poets there and they would read, poetry.
Yeah.
Do they have that
Owl by Allen
in
Ginsberg.
Jersey? Is that dead?
Yes.
we had it too.
Yeah, we had one in Kendall Park, at the Kendall Park Shopping Center. They had a coffee shop there. And I went to them and suggested the idea of having poets, read there. But the problem is space. First of all, it wasn't set up, for, it's just like a narrow thing like this. And they have very few tables and so forth. But yeah, that comes and goes. And you got to keep in mind, you remember what I talked to about the Yam Fest? Anybody know about the Yam Fest?
Oh, boy.
As in sweet potato?
So sad.
Oh, my. Spent all those weeks you spent on that.
Boring you to tears about the Yam Fest. Yeah, George Siegel, who is our most famous person other than John Wetherill, who's been forgotten because he's much older than George Siegel in his time period. But when you walked into the library, did you see our former science department chair, Dave Cutleroff?
No.
That statue in there is of Dave Cutleroff and Millie Cutleroff. And that's our connection with New Brunswick and with the South Brunswick Library. But what happened was that a group of artists and musicians in New York and Rutgers wanted to have some sort of happening. The hippies and the beatnik stuff and the word happening. The word happening was invented in South Brunswick and nobody knows it.
Oh.
The first happening was on George Siegel's egg farm. And what he did was invite these artists. And this is the event in South Brunswick where the most famous people, that you can find on the computer and all that, gathered in one place in South Brunswick. Even more famous than when the generals marched through here to go to the Battle of Monmouth. But at that Yam Fest, which is May spelled backwards, and it happened in May, Okay, and many of the artists and musicians who showed up were left-leaning, so they were doing a May Day celebration, as the communists would do. And a lot of these people were socialists, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, they got together at George Siegel's farm. He and his wife spent most of the fest indoors. And what they did was they took over the place. They strung toilet paper up on trees like that's some innovative novel thing. They had somebody in a car drive and run into these haystacks. They had a guy play the saxophone, just one note, over and over and over again. So it was a, you know, it was a crazy beat. And I said, we still haven't found somebody who admitted that they were there from South Brunswick. But there were, I would say, close to 100 people there, I would guess. And we have a file on it. And the Zimmerly has a file on the Yam Fest. It was a big deal, but nobody in South Brunswick, ho-hum, never heard of it. Blah, 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 blah. So one thing we're going to do is have a Yam Fest, probably when I'm in the old folks' home. But we'll have it. And it'll be wild. It'll be wild. But that was just a.
There was a documentary about that I saw.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, it was a big thing.
It was out. It's out. If you care.
I've seen this and that on it, and I say we have the file. So I know more than I really want for my health to know about the Yam Fest. And you know, it's like beating my head against the wall to try to get other people to get excited about it.
Well, I like to make the analogy that it's like Burning Man, but way before, because it's, you know, it was crowd participation. Everybody got to be involved with it.
That's Celtic too.
Yeah. So, you know, but the connection today, people are like, what's that? Like, people know what Burning Man is more.
Yeah, well, we could have the Burning Man in South Brunswick.
Yeah, we'll talk to the mayor, right?
Obey the fire regulations.
We'll talk to Carly about it.
And poetry slams, that was out for a while. Where does that fit in the history of poetry?
Poetry slams?
Yeah, more recent.
That's recent, that's
Sorry.
contemporary. They didn't have poetry slams back in the old days. It wasn't the genteel thing to do. You know, if you had a poet get up and recite or whatever, in the old days, it's rapt attention, perfect silence. You're listening, you're hanging on every word. The poetry slam, it's more kinetic. There's a lot going on, and it's competitive. The old poets, other than egos and in bars and so forth, would not be competitive. There were animosities and that sort of thing, but it didn't come out in public. Like you didn't have one poet at one end of the mall and another poet at the other end of the mall. And they're railing forth with their stuff, you know. Okay. So it's a modern thing.
Right, just in the progression of poetry.
Yeah, and you know, rap music and rap poetry and that sort of thing. That's part of it. That's a component of it. And you know, you tend to say, well, that's young people's stuff. You know, that's for the young people. And I don't think we're into it. Is anybody into rap music and stuff here?
But poetry is coming back. The presidents have it on their inaugurations.
You know,
there's a national poet every year.
Yeah. Oh, you mean a poet laureate?
Poet laureate, yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And even Biden goes around reciting Yeats, Irish poets, doesn't he?
Mispronouncing words. The thing is, it's a token attention to it. So it doesn't go anywhere. Doesn't get anywhere. I went to a Hero Poet Laureate one time. This is in Philadelphia, and it was great. And the audience was great, but it's like a once in a lifetime thing. If you're not into the rap stuff and the music and so forth like that, you got to really hunt for those types of venues. And right now, Princeton would probably be your best bet.
Amanda Gorman.
Yeah, something going on in Princeton. Okay, Randy, what else you got?
Yeah, how do you want to do the rest. I mean, we can't get through.
I
these.
don't know, with the amount of money you pay me, I'm ready to go.
So I
To
was
go
just-
soon, but I have a request, number 41, which is number 11.
Oh, the school?
Because it, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, personal interest has these.
Great,
Are they
great, good
good?
choice.
I need to take a leave, so thank you so much.
Okay, you got
Thank you,
it.
Connie.
Nice to see you.
Got it.
To go to.
Drop in next time
I
too.
did, sure.
Yeah, Penny, you get a gold star too, because that's one of my favorites.
I didn't put the name in it. You got an A.
No, just gold star. No, we don't give A's. No, I gave him a gold star. Didn't I
No,
give
you
you a
gave him an
gold
A
star?
too.
You gave him an A.
I can't go back on your word, too many witnesses.
Thought you gave him a spitball.
He's an old duffer. We go way back, teaching wise and softball wise, so he's okay. He's behaving himself pretty well.
Yes, he is.
Okay, this is Sand Hill School number 41. This is on Major Road. Now you know where it is because you know where Burger King is on Route 1.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, right behind, tucked behind Burger King is a little cemetery. And then the house that now people live in, that used to be the school. And this poem came to me, well, I knew I was going to do it because Randy and I visited the cemetery. And Randy goes over to check out the house, you know, and he's looking at this. You took some pictures of it, right?
Yeah, I was actually
Right.
trying to pull them up.
So I said, oh, I got to write about this. Now, the problem is getting information about the school. Luckily, Seal Leadham dug up some information, and like the name of the teacher is real. And the picture tells a story in itself. The only thing that's missing, you see that little bell tower on the top? That's missing. Okay, other than that, the thing is pretty much
Just
intact.
if you can see on my phone, it's really small, but that's where it is. You can see it right on the road when you go Burger King. Yep, it's still there.
A lot of people, when they can't make a left into Burger King, drive up there, do the U-turn, go back to
Yeah,
Burger King
yeah,
to make my teeth are still out to lunch, to make a legitimate U-turn.
Yeah. And you know, it's changed, that cemetery, they put up trees.
Yes, they
That-
cleaned it up.
those were messed up, and they put up stones and then put up a fence there at one
Yeah.
time, and
Yeah.
it gets
The
vandalized.
2 years I've been here, they cleaned it up.
Where did these black people live?
Right, with
Uh,
the little poster.
This would have been
That's like today.
probably, there's a couple of places that they could, because they had these little schools around, you know,
Okay,
the
yes.
various parts. And this was on Major Road, Major Road goes down to the old high school. You're familiar with the old South
Yes,
Brunswick High
yes.
School. So this is part of your Dean's area. But Monmouth Junction overlaps, and Kendall Park is a new thing, so that wasn't involved. I would say that these students probably came from Route 27 as you're going towards the Amish market and going towards Princeton. There's a place called Little Rocky Hill. That was an integrated community. And there were several African-American families living in there. And I would say the possibility is that they came from that area. Okay, now that's just a guess. Don't take me to task on that, but I think that's where they were from. And they would have to travel a big distance to get to this school.
Exactly.
Because, you know, in the real old days, Route 1 was just dirt. It wasn't paved until just before the Depression. I think 1920s they paved it. Yeah. Okay, let's get on with it here. There's a math problem in the school poem. It's not really a problem, but what I did was, and this is what it's woven around, is the numbers. Okay, and so you might be alert to that. Little school on the hill. Small in stature I may be, 1 story tall is all, with windows square and plain, each side numbering at 3. But I stand close to heaven, high atop Sand Hill's crown, next to a sacred church, and graves in 1907. When stars are out and it's late, a reverie does prevail. Traffic on the turnpike runs rare shortly after 8. But my one room comes alive by workday's early morn, with 40 wee scholars at benches numbering 5. Miss Pearl Klein secures the door, glides to her oaken desk, is greeted ever so warm by all but the miscreant 4. Frowning boys who strayed again, had felt her ruler's sting for playing games of keep away with slates of primes times 10. Then all children stand in line, recite the nation's pledge, read Bible verse aloud. First lesson begins at 9. Recess brings the loudest fun whene'er the sky is right. My yard is frolic filled till Pearl's bell is rung at 1. My busy day ends on cue after choices are made of library books to read. Take only 1, never 2. Miss Pearl Klein remains to fix my room as it should be, completes her cleaning chores, and locks my door before 6. Back to silence goes this hero, shuttered and left alone to contemplate the dark and emptiness of 0.
Okay, so the math is to add up all your
Yeah, well,
numbers at the
yeah,
end.
in other words, all your prime
Yeah,
numbers are
that's-
there.
That's fine.
Yeah.
That's that, now, that's a beautiful poem.
It's fun. It's light verse.
Yeah.
And but it has a fairly strong message, and it sort of tells you about the schools back in the day. And you notice the teacher has to do all the janitorial chores, you know. Her work is not over when.
Yeah,
that's right. I read that in the reference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything, they could be married.
I
Yeah.
remember a school where the students and the teachers.
Yes, right.
We used to do that.
And it was
And that
great.
was in the
Yeah.
70s.
Yes,
Oh my
the
God.
rate, clean the erasers,
Oh my gosh.
blackboards.
Oh my
Absolutely.
God.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The racist, because they have to go outside.
Yeah, I remember Dan Silo and I moving chairs up from the basement,
Oh.
down to the basement, up.
Yeah. Yeah. we
That was
all
good.
had to do
Yeah.
that.
Anybody have any questions on it?
How many kids would be in that school that?
Well, the thing that I found was the number of desks, the number of benches, 5, and probably 5 could fit on a bench. You know, this is what you would call your one-room schoolhouse. And so,
40 scholars.
yeah, and so you would be crowded, and you would have different ages. And the older kids would be teaching the younger kids, you know, that type of thing. And you'd have the one school marm, okay, to handle those kids. You know, now they say, I don't know, what's the ideal, 25 kids in a classroom for one teacher,
Yeah.
and possibly an aide, you know, that type of
Oh,
thing.
yeah, I mean, kids
But-
back then.
But back in the old days.
If you could catch up, you're done.
Yeah, but back in the days, I mean, most of the kids were pretty well behaved.
Yeah,
You didn't have any
you
snarky
didn't go
type
home and
stuff.
tell anyone because you got it twice as bad.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but there were some bad eggs.
Yeah, but their bad eggs opposed to other bad eggs is a little different.
Yeah, but that's a universal. You're always gonna get some apples that are a little brown.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's like comparing the blackboard jungle to today. I mean, it's not the same
Yeah.
sort of, sort
Watch
of love,
that,
it's
show.
just,
What's
yeah.
that show that's on now? Something, Abbott
Elementary?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of close to, it's fun.
It's supposed to be Philly, right? That's filled up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
But those, they tend to be humorous, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't say anything in here about heating. Was there a fireplace in the
that's
school?
right.
It's usually a potbelly stove.
Usually a potbelly stove, yeah.
And teacher had to come in
Yeah, because
early
the
and
teacher
stoke
had to
it,
do that too, and
Yeah.
that's not.
and then make sure it was knocked out before
Yeah, right.
Right.
anyone left.
Might get one of the older boys to chop wood, you know, that type of thing. But you're talking about pretty rustic.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, South Brunswick, you know, for many, many years was rustic.
Rustic itself.
It was it, you know, we were the 4th ward of New Brunswick. And we were the last to know what was going on. And like I say, we went all the way down to Province Line Road. That's a huge amount of territory.
Yeah.
I'm talking about way back, you were basically before schools appeared. I think the first school was in Kingston. It was associated with the church, Presbyterian Church. And these public schools didn't come in until after that.
Well, public schools weren't required until 1842.
1840s?
Yeah, 1840s. I do that through the handwriting history.
Yeah,
And the 1890s, 16% of the US population was attending schools. And that was the largest in the world at the time.
yeah.
Not many, yeah.
And in South Brunswick, a lot of the kids did not attend a full day because they had to work on the farms.
Yeah.
So they left early.
So you went on an agricultural agenda where they took lots of time off to do the harvesting and planting.
Seasonal type thing,
Yeah.
yeah. So very rustic back in those days.
Mm.
Okay, we're all set?
Yep.
Thank you, Ed.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, hey, I hope you got something out of it, because the thing is, you know, you could have somebody come in and just read their poems and you get nothing really, you know, you don't get the inside story. So I like to give you some of
always
the
get
inside
something.
story.
It was great.
Penelope, are you from
Read and
town?
bring it back?